Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, why did prosecutors in the Omotoso rape case fail to do their basic job to prove the charges against the televangelist? Yesterday, the nation was shocked as Judge Emma Schoeman delivered her judgment on the matter after 8 years of testimonies and delays, which led to the acquittal of Timothy Omotoso and his co-accused. Not because they're not guilty, but because state prosecutors bungled the case. They were seemingly incompetent. Now the Justice Minister Mamuluko wants answers. Advocate Barry Madolo is the Director of Public Prosecutions in the Eastern Cape. He faces the nation tonight. Also on the show, how is the South African government going to respond to these tariffs announced by US President Donald Trump? Trump has slapped us with a 30% tariff. Does this spell the end of AGOA? Because over the last 2 decades or so, we enjoyed duty-free access to the US market through AGOA. But now with a universal tariff of 10% levied on all US imports and a 25% tariff on vehicle imports, this may be it, the end of AGOA. So how is government planning to cushion the most affected industries? And should it retaliate also with tariffs? That's a conversation also on the show tonight. And then later, why did the Health Minister, Dr Motsoaledi, gazette regulations banning the import, manufacturing and the sale of any foods containing cannabis and cannabis products, only to withdraw the regulations on instruction of the President? Was the blanket ban gazetted without consulting stakeholders? The Health Minister, Dr Motsoaledi, speaks to us tonight. But first, my comment. So, the Minister of Justice, Mamuluko Kubai, has expressed concerns over the handling of the Omotoso case by state prosecutors. She now wants a comprehensive report from the NPA bosses on what happened. Yesterday, we were all shocked as Judge Emma Schoeman delivered that judgment on the matter after 8 years of testimonies. There were lots of delays as well. And that whole matter, after so long, has led to the acquittal of Nigerian televangelist Timothy Omotoso and his 2 co-accused. Omotoso, who is the leader of the Jesus Dominion International Church, was acquitted of all these charges in the Eastern Cape High Court. Him and his co-accused were facing these charges that are ranging from rape and trafficking to sexual assault and racketeering. He is now a free man, and he may very well be a rich man if he considers to sue the state for keeping him behind bars for 8 years and for failing to prove the charges against him. Here's what Judge Schoeman said as she delivered that judgment yesterday.
I'm of the view that although there are aspects of the complainant's evidence that are unsatisfactory, I cannot find that their evidence is incredible. However, I cannot find that the evidence of the accused falls to be rejected as false either. This is especially so as the accused evidence was not placed in dispute through proper cross-examination. When deciding whether the state has proved its case beyond reasonable doubt, this matter falls into the category where, in my view, the explanations of the accused are improbable, and I don't subjectively believe them. However, due to the uncertainty of the actions of the state and the lack of proper cross-examination, I cannot find that the accused version are so improbable that they cannot reasonably possibly be true. The accused bore no onus to convince the court of their innocence. I am of the view, in the light of all the circumstances of the case, that the state has not proved its case beyond reasonable doubt.
So the judge basically criticized what she said was the unethical conduct of prosecutors and their incompetent cross-examination. In fact, she described that cross-examination as shallow. So the prosecutors have dismally failed to prove the charges against this man beyond reasonable doubt. They didn't even meet the basic test of prima facie. And we need to have a serious conversation about the NPA's management of cases. We need to have a serious conversation about the capacity of the NPA. There are consequences to a judgment like this. Because the issue is not so much that the accused is not guilty. The issue is that the state bungled the case. And that has an impact on the confidence of South Africans in the justice system. Even the Justice Minister, Mamuluku Kubai, whose department provides oversight over the NPA, expressed her concerns today about how prosecutors handled this case. And she now wants answers.
I have written to the NDPP, Advocate Batoi of the NPA, evoking Section 33(2)A of the NPA Act in relation to the Omotoso and others case. You'd understand that this has been a case that has dragged for almost 8 years, with victims that have gone all out to give testimony. Watching a young woman cry in court after the verdict was heartbreaking. I took time to go through the judgment, and unfortunately, the judge was scathing against the NPA. It is this results that have led me to take this decision and action. I've given the NDPP until Monday the 7th to give me a report in terms of this matter, and will take the matter forward. This concerns me more because many of the victims of GBV take real effort, but out of their comfort to go and testify in court. And my fear as a Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development is that this outcome might discourage many who have been brave enough to stand against the most powerful people to give testimony in court, some in the most discomfort way, where they expose themselves to public scrutiny.
And one of the witnesses who exposed herself to public scrutiny is Cheryl Zondi, who was in court yesterday, and she was equally devastated.
We took it upon ourselves to go through a humiliating process, to have our dignity stripped from us in public, to be called names, and have lies and all sorts of fabrications spread about us online when we're walking down the street. Our lives have never been the same after coming out about this. And one has to wonder, so this is what the last 8 years of our lives has come down to. The main concern wasn't even the knowing of what he did to us. It's knowing that he's not gonna stop. He's gonna continue doing this to other women and other girls. And that's what we wanted to stop. That's what we wanted to prevent. To say it ends with us and it's not gonna go any further. But he's not gonna stop. It's in his nature.
These are the kind of consequences of incompetence, the consequences when the prosecutors are not doing their job. And the sad thing is that this is not the only case that's been mismanaged. There are other critical cases that the NPA has failed to successfully prosecute or that ended in acquittal. There are state capture cases that the NPA has bungled, where prosecutors enrolled matters, they arrested people only for charges to be withdrawn or for the cases to be struck off the roll because there was simply not enough evidence, or that evidence that was submitted was not authenticated. And these are basic boxes that should be ticked before the matters are brought to court. I mean, there was the Nulani investment case, the Estina Dairy Farm case, Zizi Koto's case was another one, Matsela Koko's case. Had the NPA done a proper job, these cases would not be legally dead for now. I told the NPA head Shamila Batohi the last time she was facing the nation here on SABC that all these embarrassing cases, the incompetence of some of the prosecutors, all of this has an impact on the public's trust in the prosecuting authority. Here's what she said. Do you understand, Advocate, that even with the 3 cases that I've raised, and of course there's a lot of work that you do as the MK, in fact these cases probably account for less than 2% of the cases that the NPA works on. But South Africans also want to see the big fish, so to speak, being prosecuted. So when they look at some of these cases that I've mentioned and they think these are cases that have been bungled, do you understand the impact they have on the public trust in the prosecuting authority?
Yes, I do. Although this actually accounts for a small percentage, you're correct, it is very, very important. And it is, in fact, the lens through which, as I said earlier, South Africans see the NPA as failing or succeeding, which is incorrect in our view, but we will deal with it. I agree the reputational harm done is huge.
So the question we're asking you tonight is, with all these failures by the NPA prosecutors, what do you think needs to be done to get the NPA's house in order? We cannot continue like this. And yes, we know about the issue of resources and skills that are limited, or funding to the NPA that has been cut. But some of the NPA's challenges have been self-inflicted. It's just pure incompetence in some instances. And I know some of you think maybe it's time the NPA head Shamila Batohi steps down, but will that solve the internal challenges? Or do you think that solving the problem starts with letting her go? Please share your thoughts with us. You can send us a WhatsApp voice note right now on 078 4591 897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you're sending that voice note from, and please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, go over to Twitter or X on @FaceTheNation SABC to share your thoughts. After the break, we'll speak to the Provincial Director of Public Prosecutions in the Eastern Cape about this matter. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mamoloko Kubai, has requested a comprehensive report from the National Director of Public Prosecutions on why the state failed to prove its case beyond reasonable doubt in the case of televangelist Timothy Omotoso. Omotoso and his co-accused, Lusanda Sulani and Zukiswa Sito, were acquitted on all charges by the Gqeberha High Court yesterday. They were facing charges of rape, human trafficking, and racketeering. Kubai expressed concern on the manner the case was handled by the prosecuting team, as Judge Emma Skuman lambasted the prosecution team for unethical conduct and incompetence in her judgment. The spokesperson to the minister, Terence Manassa, says this is a setback for victims of gender-based violence and related crimes. Let's now bring in Advocate Barry Madolo, who is the Director of Public Prosecutions in the Eastern Cape, joins us now via live feed. Advocate, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening, and good evening to
the competence or lack thereof of your prosecutors is under question this evening. There's a man who was accused of rape, accused of racketeering, of trafficking. He's now a free man, not because he's not guilty, but because your prosecutors failed to do their job. How do you explain this incompetence that Judge Skuman spoke about in her judgment? And do you agree with her?
Clement, what I must just make clear is that we are now talking about the comment that was made by the judge, right? And we have, asked our prosecutors to submit reports, and we've asked for transcripts to see if what the judge said is correct, But when it comes to competence, the three prosecutors that we feel that in this matter are the most experienced prosecutors, Two are senior state advocates, one is a deputy, and they've been doing these cases for years. So it is unfortunate that we find this, ourselves being accused of incompetence. I think the judge's gripe mainly is about the cross-examination. And I've asked for a transcript of the cross-examination to see whether the judge is correct in what she found,
But based,
so we'll be studying.
Based on your assessment, though, Advocate Madolo, do you think that the prosecutors did a great job?
Well, as far as I know, because I kept a tab on this matter, I had my fingers on the pulse of this case. I think the prosecutors did a good job there. Remember, this case has a long history. There was a team of prosecutors which we had to remove. Then we brought in this new team of prosecutors, you know, and it's a trusted team, you know. So I was also a bit taken aback when I saw the judgment and what I said.
But Advocate Madolo, if you so believe that the prosecutors did a good job here, how did the case then end in acquittal? Because the judge, in fact, said the prosecutor didn't even know that digital penetration of genitalia constituted rape. So how do you explain that? How can a prosecutor in a rape case with 14 years of experience not know the definition of rape and that it included digital penetration?
I think, Clement, one needs to, you know, look at the judgment as a whole and the transcript as a whole, you know, because these prosecutors that were there, these are seasoned prosecutors, all right? And again, I just want to add something. I'm not defending them because I still have to read the whole transcript, you know. But my view and our position is this. We're waiting for a copy of the judgment, which we're supposed to get today. And then we're going to take the matter from there, you know. As far as we are concerned, or I am concerned, this is not the end of the matter. Depending on what we get, you know, from the copy of the judgment that we're waiting for. We're weighing our options.
So where I'm a little confused, Advocate, is that there's a matter here that was before the court.
Yeah.
The judge doesn't say that because of the merits in this matter and having looked at the evidence that's been submitted by the NPA, I find that this man is not guilty. And that's where the challenge is. The judge seems to be questioning the work of your prosecutors in this matter. And that's why the matter is acquitted. So that's why I'm confused about if they've done a great job, we wouldn't be here. This man would be either behind bars or at least at the very least, the judge wouldn't have had such a scathing judgment on the behavior or lack of understanding or even the capability of the prosecutors. But that seems to be the central thing that has led to this matter being acquitted.
Yeah, Clement, but you must understand that these are the comments of the judge, right? So we still have to look at the record.
So the Minister of Justice wants answers now because she's concerned, and rightly so, about the impact of this mismanagement on the trust and confidence in the justice system. Will you be the one explaining to her what happened, or that will be your boss, Advocate Shamila Batohi?
The NTV people will deal with that. We've already submitted a preliminary report to her.
Okay, but what does that preliminary report say? Because you've just said that you still want to look at the transcript of the judgment. So based on that preliminary report, are you satisfied as the NPA about the performance in this case of your prosecutors?
Well, so far, except for what the judge has said, I still have not found fault with my prosecutors until I get the transcript.
What is your message to the witnesses like Cheryl Zondi, who decided to testify to help the state's case? These are people who feel failed by the justice system. They had to make a huge sacrifice of sitting in court for so long, being triggered, being asked questions, being judged publicly. They did that, though, because they wanted to see justice. What do you say to them when they look at a matter like this that ends up in acquittal and they hear a judge pointing fingers at prosecutors and blaming them for the matter ending in acquittal, and not so much the merits of the case or the fact that this man is actually not found guilty?
Thank you for that, Clement. My message to, the ladies, that had to go through all this trauma is that I just want to thank them for the sacrifice that they have made. And I want to thank them for working with the prosecutors throughout this process, because it has been a long journey which had a number of obligations along the way until we are where we are today. So I want to thank them for that. And I also want to say to them, this is not the end of the road.
Well,
all right? We're weighing our options here. And there is, if all, goes well, there is a chance that we might, appeal. I'm not saying we're going to appeal yet because we have not seen the judgment, but we're weighing our options. So this may not be the end of the road.
Okay, but if you are not seeing any fault with your prosecutors, it should then be easy to, as the NPA, decide that you take the matter on appeal, because you'd be confident in the case that they put forward, and you would want to try and hear if another court might find differently.
The thing is, Clement, before you appeal, it's always better to get a copy of the record. Okay? Copy of the judgment. You look at that, you look at the judge's comments, and then you take the route of the appeal.
Is the appeal the only option that's available to you? So in a matter where there is an acquittal, can you enroll the matter, or is appeal the only option you can consider if you want to take it forward?
Only appeal, the only route at this stage, is the appeal.
Okay. Was were the prosecutors happy with the work that was done by the investigators, or was this maybe the failure of the investigating officer? Like, were you handed a watertight investigation as the NPA? Because the judge says even that cross-examination was shallow and lacked the intention to uncover the truth.
The investigation here was complete, right? It was a watertight case. I cannot falter the investigations I cannot fault the investigators in this matter. They did a good job. The witnesses did a good job as well, and we were all taken aback, when Omotoso was acquitted.
Okay, Advocate, thank you so much for making time for us. That's Advocate Barry Madolo, who's the Director of Public Prosecutions in the Eastern Cape, joining us there about this matter in the Eastern Cape High Court in Gqeberha. If the investigating officers did a good job, if the witnesses themselves did a good job, if the prosecutors did a good job, as the advocate says, then why are we sitting with a situation where the matter has ended up in acquittal? And that's where my confusion is. And the matter has ended in acquittal not because the man is found not guilty, but because the judge is pointing a finger at the performance of the prosecuting team. So we've been asking you a question this evening about what you think needs to happen here, because this is not the only case that has been bungled by the NPA. Yes, the advocate in the Eastern Cape may seem to be happy with the work of his prosecutors, but having observed this case, the matters, how the cross-examination was done, the judge saying that the person didn't even know the definition of rape fully in a rape case with 14 years of experience, these are not mistakes that should be made by prosecutors. So your thoughts have come through on Twitter. Bono says the NPA is no longer a reliable institution. If they can't adequately prosecute such important cases of GBV, then something is not right. We need a national director of public prosecutions that will make sure that such cases are handled with caution by experienced legal representatives. Tacho says to get its house in order, the NPA should focus on the following: strengthening investigative capacity, enhancing prosecutorial independence, and training and development. Melikaya says South Africa has incompetence naturalized at service delivery level. The NPA head in any serious country would have resigned many years ago. Every big case the NPA has bungled. They are never ready in court. As for the Omotoso case, those prosecutors must account. Well, are they going to account? I mean, if their boss says that I'm happy with the work that they've done, then how are they going to account? If their boss is saying that, well, I don't see any fault with how they've handled this matter, then you've got to wonder, is there even going to be accountability? And will the same prosecutors be put in matters that are of rape in matters that are as critical as this? And what are the consequences of that? Here's what some of you have said on our WhatsApp line.
Good evening, Clement. My name is Ntlagani Potlaba. I think Batoi must just resign. A number of things have gone wrong under her leadership ever since she took office as the head of the NPA. And I think the best thing that she can do now is to resign, because she herself is incompetent. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Face the Nation and Mzansi. You know, this is Bagi in Cape Town. In my humble opinion, I think the Omotoso case is one of those hard cases our South African legal system would have been tested to the core. Unfortunately, NPA has lost the ball, has compromised the whole proceedings. This is Bagi in Cape Town.
All right, please send us more of your WhatsApp voice notes responding now that you've heard from the man who's the boss of these prosecutors that the judge told us has bungled this case. What do you make of what he had to say? He says, I'm satisfied with the work that they've done. But if really they've done a satisfactory work, why has the matter ended in acquittal then? Let us know your thoughts. Send us a WhatsApp voice note or go over to Twitter. Before we wrap up the show, we'll go back to your comments. After the break, we'll have a conversation with the Minister of Health, Dr. Motsoaledi. Stay with us here on Face the Nation. Welcome back. Now, the production and use of cannabis and hemp in South Africa remains a contentious issue. During the State of the Nation address earlier this year, President Cyril Ramaphosa said government wants the country to be leading in the commercial production of hemp and cannabis. Last month, Minister of Health, Dr. Motsoaledi, gazetted regulations banning the manufacture, sale and import of food products derived from cannabis and hemp. And then a few weeks later, the presidency announced the withdrawal of that ban on cannabis and hemp and affirmed its support for more stakeholder engagements on the new regulations. The Health Minister, Dr. Motsoaledi, joins us now in studio. Minister, thank you so much for making time. Good evening.
Good evening, Clement. Good evening to the listeners and viewers.
I want us to go a few steps back and maybe explain why it was necessary to gazette the notice that bans the import, manufacturing and sale of any foods containing cannabis and cannabis products.
Yeah, Clement, you see, when the whole issue of cannabis started, coincidentally, I was an MEC for agriculture in Limpopo. You know, when they spoke about hemp and all that, we're thinking about industrial use, industrialization, but also medicinal use. And for you to use that in a medically is regulated by SAPRA. It becomes a regulated substance. Remember, there's no medicine that can be sold officially in the country that can go into your body without it being accredited by SAPRA. So we have been knowing that. Now, all of a sudden, out of the blue, you see popcorns, chocolate, lollipops, you know, everything, and especially products that we know are consumed mostly by young people. That was scary for me, because we know that some people believe there's nothing wrong with cannabis. I'm working in health, Clement, I can tell you. And one of the biggest researches was done by the American Academy of Pediatrics, where they say definitely cannabis has got an effect in the brains that are still growing, brains of young people that are still growing. It affects them in many ways than one, and it's not safe at all. For me and you, maybe, we can stop consuming cannabis because our brains have stopped growing. But for the growing brain, it's dangerous. Now, I was just scared, you know, because look at our history. We just come from a few months, not years, where young people here were dying because of commercial reasons. You know the organophosphate in foodstuffs. We couldn't save our children. Now, all of a sudden, when we thought we have just put that under control, then there are these products. There are already quite a number of kids who have been caught hallucinating, who were sick and all that. So it was quite scary, and we thought perhaps before anything else is said, we need to protect our children.
Yeah.
And because I don't think you will be happy if you go home one day and you find your child sucking a lollipop, and a 6-year-old or so sucking a lollipop, and they tell you they've got cannabis. I'm sure you'll be very concerned. You'll never believe the stories that there's nothing wrong with it. And you will like me as a minister at least to err on the side of caution.
Yeah, and of course, as that's what we expect as citizens, that you protect us as consumers as well as South Africans, as the Department of Health. Did you consult, though, with the stakeholders before these regulations were gazetted?
No, I didn't, because the matter was very urgent for me. Because the foodstuffs, which I even took them in a paper bag to show them to the president, were actually not even produced in the country by businesses inside the country. They were exported, especially from Europe and the US, you know, especially, in Europe and US, especially from Netherlands. These chocolates, these lollipops, these, you know, they were all coming in. Now, at the borders, you remember that people have always attacked us of having porous borders. We now have a border management authority. Inside the border management authority, there is what you call Port Health. Port Health used to be people who were under health, but now they've been transferred to the border management authority. They're the ones who control what must come in and out of the country in the form of medicines, chemicals, and all that, you know. Now, they saw these things coming in, and they said, if it has got cannabis, then there must be a certification from SAPRA. So they demanded it that, no, you are bringing these things to the country. Can we see your accreditation from SAPRA that you are allowed to trade in these type of things? And they said, no. SAPRA has been established in terms of the Medicine and Related Substance Act of 1965. This which I'm bringing is not a medicine, it's food. And SAPRA doesn't regulate food in whatever form. So leave me. You have got no right over what I'm doing. Now, the Food, Disinfectant and Cosmetics Act of 1972 is under the Department of Health. So we looked at it and realized that, to me, this is an emergency. And Section 15 of that act talks about this consultation. But Section 15(6)(b) said if you think the matter is urgent, then you don't have to consult. So we invoked that part of the act.
Okay.
Yes.
So did you then not see eye to eye with the president? Because the president sent you back and said, go withdraw and consult.
No, he didn't send me back. He called me. He called me. In fact, let me put it clearly. There was a white paper on social development, which was being discussed in a cabinet committee. And one of the issues there were issues of drugs in the country, mental health and drugs in the country. And so when we discussed that part, I said, President, there is this thing, and I really want you to convene us to talk about it. There's the issues of cannabis. Because by the time I've already issued regulations and there were, you know, commotion here and there, and I said, perhaps, President, he said, no, actually I was going to call you about it, and yes, he's correct, let's meet. And we made an appointment, and I brought in SAPRA, I brought in the team from health, and the president brought a team, you know, which is dealing with this hemp and all that. We sat and discussed, and it was in that discussion when he said, look, I understand you, and I see this thing is actually said, I'm very disturbed because I never thought something like this happening. But because it happened so suddenly, and because this looks like there's a different understanding of what I announced in Parliament during State of the Nation, I would like you to withdraw them and start from the beginning so that we do a wild consultation. I didn't see anything wrong with that.
And that's what confused a lot of people, because the president talks about we have to explore this industry and its potential.
If you read that speech, he never said anything about foodstuffs.
Yes, he didn't.
He
But
never said anything about foodstuff. It was about industry. We are very comfortable about that. But foodstuff is something else.
Yes. But then a blanket ban also is going to cause some confusion as well. Because yes, as the health department, you have a responsibility to protect the consumers.
Blanket ban for foodstuffs.
So what I got from the stakeholders was that we're confused about the regulations.
No. It was specifically for foodstuffs. Why should I go and ban hemp, which you put in the dashboard or in some, furniture and all that? What should be a problem? But my problem is if it's in food, what is it? What does it want in food, and especially foods that are consumed by children? This is where I found the evil of this whole thing. Food that is consumed by young people whose brains are still growing. And I said, if I'm making a mistake, it'd rather be on the side of caution in protecting young children, rather than not making a mistake and all of a sudden we have got another wave of emergencies in our children. I mean, what type of government will we be? Last year it was foodborne, illnesses because of organophosphate. When you said we deal with it, now this side is suddenly cannabis, where kids are running amok and all that. It can't be fair. Can't be fair.
So what's the next step now?
And it comes from Europe. And let me tell you, Clement, what South Africans do not realize. European countries are far advanced. They've got a way to control these things, if you understand what I mean. They've got the skills to detect some of these things. We don't have. We just running around with them, and that's why when the president was speaking, the impression some of us was getting was that this is to promote business inside the country, production, those people who produce these things and all that. So if they are produced in Europe and coming here, what is our gain? What is the gain of the people in Eastern Cape who are planting this thing? Because it's a product of Eastern Cape, coincidentally also of Limpopo, where I come from. There are areas in Limpopo, in Malawaro Mountains, and some mountains in Skukune where people flourish by selling these things, and it used to be banned by police and all that. Now they say no, it's no longer criminalized. But the people who are gaining are now from Europe. I don't think any small producer in the Eastern Cape is gaining from this type of thing. So, and that's also worrying,
Okay, so have you started consultations with industry stakeholders? Because you saying you thought it's an emergency. The president says, let's start from scratch.
Well, since it's not an emergency anymore, yes, we are preparing for that. Preparing for that. On my side, I thought it's an emergency, but everybody else believes it's not. So what can I do? Everybody else, including yourself, industry, they believe, there's nothing wrong. Some will even come into you and say, I'm acting unscientifically, there's no scientific evidence. Then I realized what's happening. When I was doing psychiatry at medical school, that's more than 42 years ago, by the way. There were two senior lecturers, specialists in psychiatry. One loved marijuana, cannabis, and he said there's nothing wrong. It will only cause you problems if there's an underlying problem in your brain. If you've got a normal brain, no. The other didn't want to hear anything. And now we are students. So you know what we had to do? We had to check during exams who said that question. Who is the person who said and is going to mark the question? If it's the other one who loves marijuana, no, there's nothing wrong. So it was confusing us, and the confusion is still here because there are people who believe there's nothing wrong with this product.
Can you find evidence that supports your move?
Oh yes, I can.
Can you not then put that evidence forward to justify then your emergency?
We are going to put it when we start consulting. There's ample evidence I've just given you. If you get into the website of the American, American Academy of Pediatrics, where they've done deep research, you'll find it. Even with us, I must tell you, it's only that law is the law. For us in health, immediately after the Constitutional Court ruling, that this thing is no longer criminalized and people were very free. In our mental health hospitals, we started seeing, the statistics going very high on the issue of mental health. We do have such figures. Of course, they are going to ask you if you ever saw this person.
Yeah, because there was the causal link.
Yes,
then.
yeah, they are going to ask about causal link, of course. But I'm just telling you that on our side, we are dealing with these things because we know now one of the biggest causes of mental health in the country is substance abuse in our country. Substances like heroin and all that, cocaine.
Alcohol
that's where
as
they
well.
start. Yes, alcohol is even the worst, by the way, because that's the starting point of everything. And it's overwhelming our facilities when we don't even have enough psychiatric nurses. So this thing is overwhelming. It's not as superficial as people think. That's why, Clement, the World Health Organization, realizing this type of thing, they came with a new concept called commercial determinants of health. Because we used to believe ill health is caused by organisms, then we knew that there are also social determinants. Things that affect your health but are determined by social factors. Then they realized there's a gap. Apart from social determinants of health, there is also commercial determinants of health, which people in the commerce area believe they must be allowed to do commerce, they are free to do that. But we in the health area know the hardships, it's more or less the battle we are having with cigarettes, with sugar, with alcohol.
Yeah, Minister, I've got to wrap now, but before we do, I have to ask you this question about, I don't know how concerned you are that there may be cuts to the health department. And I'm asking this because your party, the ANC, has gotten into the deal with Action SA to have the finance minister go and rework the budget and find a way to remove that VAT hike. But if he doesn't have, in fact, if he doesn't remove that VAT hike, he has to find additional revenue somewhere. And there are concerns that spending on critical departments like yours, which is health, that spending may be affected. Are you worried at all? Because I imagine there would be consequences for that.
The minister said it very clearly, and the president always says it, and I'm saying it. We've been worried for the past 10 years. The austerity that has been happening in this country was affecting health and education very negatively. In health, more so. And we even have a graph that shows how the expenditure in health was going down, and it went up during COVID 2020 because all the departments, I remember I was in Home Affairs, they have to take 500 million from me to give to health to fight COVID. But immediately after COVID, it came tumbling down. The result is that all provinces, all of them, 9 provinces, towards the end of the financial year, they cannot order anything because they've completely run out of money. When the new financial year starts, they start paying for the last financial year's accruals and then start a new, a new accrual again. And what happens when you are working in hospital? You sometimes can't do operations, you sometimes lack very serious commodities and all that. So it has been happening to us for the past 10 years. And we want it to stop. And
if they remove that now, it may happen some more. If they don't find it.
I don't think that should happen, Clement.
What should happen? Remove that.
Well, look. The minister said there's no other way. There are people who believe there are other ways. Let's see those other ways. All we are saying is please. Because in education, for instance, it means we are going to lay out a certain number of teachers. You know, the matches that have already happened in the Western Cape. So education and health, they are very serious social programs of our country, which our people depend on. So they should not be subjected to austerity.
Yeah. Minister, thank you so much for making time for us. That's the Minister of Health, Dr. Motsoaledi. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. Now, following U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement of new tariffs for South Africa and many other countries on Wednesday, the Director General in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Zane Dango, says the real concern is how to make international trade more fair. He says issues of trade with Washington are a global matter Remember, Trump announced a global 10% tariff on all imports and higher rates for a number of nations he referred to as worst offenders. Joining us now for a discussion on this is economic analyst Bongani Mahlangu. Bongani, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening, Clement, colleagues in studio and viewers at home.
So Donald Trump said yesterday was Liberation Day for America, but he announced these tariffs. It was certainly a devastating day for us as South Africa, but also the rest of the world. Having assessed these tariffs now, how bad does it look for us as South Africa?
Thanks. So I think it's part of Donald Trump's golden age in terms of America. But when we look into the numbers, just in February of this year, America in terms of export was our biggest trading partner. 8.6% of the total trade went to America, or we exported to America. And the total trade was around 164 billion. And then when it comes to imports, so what we got from America, it was 5.3%, and they're also there in the top 5 as well. So obviously that implies that a lot of jobs are created in the value chain, and some of those jobs, in fact, that are created operate in our country, around 662 of those companies. So then there are job implications there, and also then it can cause, that means a reduction of production, a reduction of sales, which means that the same companies must cull their labor force, and if they cull their labor force, in terms of what you are talking about earlier with VAT, so that's less revenue to the state, and the state still has a mandate to fund all its expenditures, so that can cause problems down the line as well, that we might not be able to fund our mandate. So at a high level, I think that's what it will then cause for South Africa in the short and in the long term.
So the U.S., of course, is our second largest export market. Over the last 2 decades or so, we enjoyed duty-free access to the U.S. markets through AGOA. Does this announcement by Trump then spell the end of AGOA? Because there's this universal tariff of 10% levied on all U.S. imports, and then you have the 25% tariff on vehicle imports, which in my understanding affects our vehicle exports, for instance, which enjoyed AGOA benefits for so long.
So basically, we're not certain as to what the negotiations are that are led by the DTIC with regards to sustaining AGOA. And these negotiations have been going on for some time. But as they are negotiating, these things are taking place. And if you look at it as well, the imposed tariff of 30%, as you said, it was a baseline of 10% plus an added 20% for us. And how it was calculated, basically, the methodology was America or Trump looked at the trade deficit and then divided the trade deficit with the imports to America, Americans importing from us or us exporting to them. And then it went to a figure of 30%. So that is not a clear scientific methodology as well. So now that has to be looked into the negotiations. But does it spell an end? That needs to be negotiated, because that's a political matter on the basis that if you look into the tenets or the sections of AGOA, it says that you have to agree or align somewhat with American principles. And the issue of Israel is actually what is causing the problems right now. Less AfriForum and more Israel. So South Africa is taking a different route, and also not just that, with multipolarity, with de-dollarization, with its participation in BRICS and so forth. So it's moving more significantly away from the US, which might be in breach of the same AGOA agreement, which might then mean that it might end. But we don't know how they'll handle it politically.
So what's the best way to do now? Because this is a reality that's facing us. 10% universal, 25% on foreign-made, produced vehicles. There's this 30% in total that is that Trump has slapped us with. As South Africa, shouldn't we be looking at new markets? I'm just thinking here about the BRICS bloc. How do we maximize that? The intercontinental free trade. Are those the things to start looking at so we find new markets for our products, given the consequences of these tariffs?
That's true. I mean, when we look into the Africa Free Trade Agreement, it's in line also with South Africa's foreign policy that says prosperity to Africa, prosperity to the world, and they translate that prosperity with the Africa Free Trade Agreement. South Africa has already begun speaking with other partners around the world when it comes to export diversification, trying to minimize its exposure to the U.S. market. And I think that's what everyone else around the world is doing in any case. But also what South Africa needs to do, it's not just always about foreign exports, but what about domestic direct investment? I mean, look at it. If you have more people that are employed in South Africa, that's more domestic consumption in South Africa. So the production that is then made by these firms in South Africa can be consumed nationally. I can make an example of BYD in China. If you look in terms of the domestic consumption, it does not really need foreign consumption because they have a big population that can afford to consume the product. So in South Africa, we have this mentality that you always have to go outside South Africa, you always have to go outside Africa in order to sell your stuff, whereas you could be selling here. So we need to grow our employment and ensure that domestic citizens are able to afford. Then South African firms can then get or supply the demand that is required domestically, and the sales will still be there. They'll make the revenue, government will make the revenue, and our country will move forward.
All right, Bongani Mahlangu, economic analyst, thank you so much for making time for us on Face the Nation this evening. All right, let's now look at some of your comments that have come through. We've been asking you this evening on Face the Nation what you think needs to be done to get the NPA's house in order. There are so many critical cases that have been bungled. So what needs to happen? What do you think is the issue with the NPA? Is it capacity issues? Is it an issue of funding being cut? Is it just pure incompetence? We've got some tweets that have come through. Rabotata says, this really is a mess by prosecutors. I suggest that this case be handled by competent prosecutors such as Gerrie Nel. Dr. Klanga says we should be intolerant of incompetence as a country. Difficult questions must also be asked. Is it really incompetence, or some are gullible to malfeasance? Surely something must give. We can't continue like this. GBV can't go unpunished in South Africa. Vuyo says, I think the NPA needs to start taking cases to court once a full investigation has been conducted and they are confident of all evidence gathered. This is an embarrassment to the NPA. Thank you for your inputs on Face the Nation this evening, and thanks for watching. We'll be back with you on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.